Yasmin's hand trembled slightly as she held the silver tray. Seated at the main table of São Paulo's most expensive restaurant was Sheikh Rashid Hakim, a billionaire from the Persian Gulf whose fortune was estimated at more than $3 billion. Beside him, three men in impeccable suits observed everything with an air of superiority. Yasmin took a deep breath and approached them. "Good evening. Welcome to La Maison d'Or," she said in a firm, professional voice. Rashid barely looked at her. His eyes remained fixed on his phone as he waved his hand as though swatting away a fly. "Wine, red," he said in broken Portuguese. Without looking up, Yasmin nodded and placed the menus on the table. "To accompany your meal, may I suggest the Chateau Margaux 2015? It was an exceptional vintage and pairs beautifully with red meat and firmer textured fish." Rashid finally raised his eyes, but there was no interest in them, only boredom and a faint, mocking smile. "Just bring anything," he said sharply. "Do you really think I need a waitress to recommend wine to me?" The executives around the table smiled discreetly. Yasmin felt the sting of the remark, but maintained her professional composure. "Of course, sir. I'll bring it right away." She turned and went to fetch the wine. Moments later, as she poured it into the crystal glasses, one of the executives beside Rashid pointed to the menu. "What do you recommend?" he asked, more out of social obligation than genuine interest. Yasmin studied the menu for a second before answering. "Tonight's sea bass was caught off the coast of Santa Catarina less than 12 hours ago. It comes with a toasted Brazil nut crust and passion fruit reduction. The acidity balances the richness of the fish, while the nuts add a crisp texture that contrasts with the tenderness of the meat." A brief silence fell over the table. The executive blinked, surprised by her technical precision, but Rashid continued typing on his phone without paying attention. Yasmin waited quietly, as she had been trained to do, invisible, yet present. "I'll have that," the executive said. Still looking at her with curiosity, Rashid finally lifted his eyes and studied her for the first time. His gaze was cold and calculating. He examined her simple uniform, the hair pulled into a flawless bun, and her upright posture. Then he turned to the men beside him and said something in Arabic. Yasmin remained still, her expression unchanged, but every word echoed in her mind like a slap. "Look at that," Rashid said in Arabic with a smirk. "This one knows how to speak beautifully about fish. She must have memorized it from the training manual." The men chuckled. One of them added, also in Arabic, "She probably didn't even finish high school, but at least she's pretty." More laughter followed. Rashid shook his head, amused by his own cruelty. Yasmin tightened her fingers around the silver tray, but her face remained serene. She knew that game. She knew that kind of contempt. At 24, she had encountered people like them her entire life, people who measured someone's value by the clothes they wore or the work they did. What Rashid did not know was that Yasmin understood every word, every cruel joke and every arrogant laugh. Before his death, her father had worked as a professional Arabic interpreter for an international trading company. Yasmin had grown up hearing the language every day. She had learned to speak it, understand it, and recognize the nuances of its different dialects, but she said nothing. She simply smiled politely and asked, "Will there be anything else?" Rashid waved his hand dismissively. "Just don't take too long," he said in Portuguese, returning his attention to his phone. Yasmin turned and walked toward the kitchen. Her heart was beating rapidly, but she held her head high. Dignity was something no one could take away from her. When she returned with the appetizers, the conversation at the table had become more animated. Rashid was speaking loudly and gesturing with his hands, clearly comfortable in the surroundings. He discussed something in Arabic with the executives, and their expressions grew more serious with each sentence. "The problem," Rashid said, "is that these Brazilians don't understand how the international market works. They want to close deals without understanding currency risk or calculating commodity fluctuations." He paused while Yasmin placed the dishes on the table. He did not even look at her before continuing. I'm negotiating a $150 million investment in port infrastructure here, but these incompetent people can't even calculate a risk-adjusted return. The executives nodded solemnly. Perhaps we should reconsider the operation, one of them suggested. Reconsider? Rashid let out a short, bitter laugh. I've closed billion-dollar deals with fewer headaches. This is pure amateurism. Yasmin finished serving and was about to step away when Rashid, still refusing to look at her, said in Arabic, "Perhaps I should ask the waitress for advice. I bet she could solve my problem better than those useless consultants I hired." The men burst into laughter. Yasmin stopped. Her entire body became tense. Slowly, she turned and looked at Rashid. He was still laughing, pleased with his own joke. He expected no response or reaction. To him, she was merely part of the decor, but Yasmin stepped forward. "May I ask you a question?" she said calmly. Rashid stopped laughing and looked at her with boredom. "What?" "You mentioned an investment in port infrastructure," she continued in Portuguese. "Are you considering the Port of Santos or a private terminal?" His smile vanished. He frowned in confusion. "What did you say?" Yasmin held his gaze. Port investments in Brazil have certain peculiarities. With a public-private partnership, the return can take between 8 and 12 years. With a private terminal, currency volatility directly affects export revenue. Have you considered a structured currency hedge? The silence at the table was absolute. The three executives stared at Yasmin as though she had suddenly started speaking Mandarin. Rashid had gone pale, not from anger, but from pure shock. She continued, switching to fluent Arabic. Every word came out with technical precision. "And since you asked for my advice in Arabic, I would say that the greatest mistake in this type of operation is underestimating local political risk. Municipal elections affect port concessions. If you haven't mapped that risk, you're throwing $150 million into the wind." Rashid stood so quickly that his chair nearly toppled backward. His face was red and the veins in his neck bulged. He pointed at Yasmin angrily. "Who do you think you are?" He shouted in Portuguese, his voice echoing throughout the restaurant. Yasmin did not step back. She looked directly into his eyes and answered in a quiet but firm voice, "Just the waitress. Sir, the one who understood every word you said." Then she turned and walked away. The entire restaurant had fallen silent. Michel Fontaine, the manager of La Maison d'Or, discreetly approached Yasmin near the kitchen entrance. He was a thin man in his early 50s who always wore an immaculate black suit. "Yasmin," he whispered, his face tense. "What happened over there?" She took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. "Nothing, Mr. Michel. It was just a misunderstanding." Michel looked toward the main table where Rashid was gesturing furiously at the executives. The sheikh was visibly agitated, speaking rapidly and pointing toward the kitchen. "Is he complaining about you?" "I don't know," Yasmin lied. She knew exactly what Rashid was saying. Every Arabic word reached her ears like poison. "That insolent waitress. Who does she think she is, challenging me like that in front of my associates?" Michel squeezed Yasmin's shoulder. "Stay in the kitchen for a few minutes." "Let me handle this." Yasmin nodded and entered the kitchen, leaning against the white-tiled wall. Her hands were trembling, not from fear, but from contained anger. She closed her eyes and for a moment saw her father's face. Jorge Almeida had been a professional interpreter, a serious man with round glasses and a rare smile. He used to return home and tell her stories about the Arab business people he worked with, always speaking respectfully and admiring their culture. "Yasmin," he would say, "Arabic is a language of poetry and business. Anyone who masters it can build bridges between worlds." He had taught her from an early age, simple phrases at first, followed by entire conversations. By the time Yasmin was 16, she could already follow the technical meetings her father interpreted. Then, there was her mother, Celia, a meticulous accountant who transformed numbers into stories. She taught Yasmin to read balance sheets, understand cash flow, and analyze investments. "Mathematics isn't only about calculations, my daughter. It's about logic. It's about predicting the future before it happens." But the future they had failed to predict was the accident. An out-of-control car struck them on the marginal Pinheiros as they returned from a business meeting. Both her father and mother died instantly. Yasmin was 21 at the time. She was studying economics at the University of São Paulo and dreaming of an international career. Everything collapsed. She had no parents, no money, and no support network. She left university during her 4th semester and began working, first as a sales assistant, then as a waitress, doing whatever she could to pay the rent and survive. 3 years later, there she was, serving men like Rashid Hakim, who treated her like a piece of furniture. Yasmin! Mikhail's voice pulled her back to the present. You may return, but please remain discreet. She nodded and returned to the dining room. The main table was calmer now. Rashid drank the wine in long sips. His face was still red, but his fury seemed to have subsided. The executives spoke quietly among themselves. Yasmin approached with another tray and placed the dishes on the table without looking directly at anyone. Professional, invisible, and composed. As she served them, however, their Arabic conversation resumed. Forgive me for that scene, Rashid said to his associates. But did you see her audacity? A waitress trying to teach me about investments. One of the executives, a man with a grey mustache, laughed. Relax, Rashid. She probably memorized something from the internet. Young women today think watching videos on YouTube makes them experts. Rashid shook his head and drank more wine. That's the problem with this country. Everyone thinks they know everything. No one knows their proper place. Yasmin finished serving and was about to leave when Rashid raised his hand. Wait, he said in Portuguese, looking directly at her. Don't leave yet. She stopped with the empty tray in her hands. Rashid turned to the executives and spoke in Arabic with a broad smile. I'm going to have some fun. The men exchanged curious glances. Rashid cleared his throat and addressed Yasmin directly in Arabic, adopting a tone of false seriousness. Since you seem to understand so much about business, let me ask you a serious question. The executives began smiling. Realizing where he was going, I'm negotiating a major agreement here in Brazil, an investment in port infrastructure, as you guessed. But I'm facing a problem. The risk-adjusted return is below expectations because of currency volatility and local regulatory instability. He paused dramatically, his eyes fixed on Yasmin as he waited for confusion to appear on her face. So, my dear expert, what would you recommend? Should I proceed with a direct investment or structure it through an offshore fund with a currency hedge and an international arbitration clause? The 3 executives burst into laughter. One slapped the table and nearly knocked over his wine glass. Rashid, you're cruel, he said in Arabic, wiping tears from his eyes. She probably thinks you're ordering dessert, another added. Their laughter grew louder. Rashid crossed his arms, pleased with himself. He expected Yasmin to freeze in embarrassment, completely lost. But Yasmin did not move. She simply held the tray more firmly, looked directly into Rashid's eyes, and answered in perfect Arabic, her voice calm and clear. If currency volatility is the problem, making a direct investment in Brazilian reais would be financial suicide. Brazil has a history of currency depreciation during electoral cycles. Structuring the operation through an offshore fund would be the most basic precaution, but that should have been part of the plan from the beginning. Rashid's smile vanished like smoke. The executives stopped laughing immediately. As for exchange rate protection, you can use forward contracts or options to secure the dollar value and avoid unpleasant surprises. Regarding legal guarantees, if you trust the Brazilian courts, you can resolve disputes here. But if you want genuine security, include international arbitration in Paris or London. Absolute silence. Rashid was no longer merely pale. His face had gone completely white, as though he had seen a ghost. Yasmin inclined her head in a polite bow. Is there anything else I can help you with? Then she turned and walked away. The table remained silent for several seconds until the executive with the grey moustache whispered in Arabic, Rashid, what just happened? Rashid did not answer. He simply stared into space, his jaw clenched and his fingers gripping the wine glass so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Rashid Hakim was not a man accustomed to humiliation. At 42, he had built a business empire extending across 3 continents. He controlled logistics companies, real estate investments in the Persian Gulf, and stakes in technology startups. Powerful men sought his opinion. Governments negotiated with him as an equal, and now a waitress, a simple waitress in a Brazilian restaurant, had dismantled him in front of his associates. He rose with such force that his chair scraped loudly against the marble floor. "Wait!" he shouted in Portuguese, his voice echoing through the room. Yasmin stopped a few feet from the table, but did not turn immediately. She took a breath, prepared herself, and slowly faced him. Rashid stepped toward her, his face red with contained anger. "You," he pointed at her. "Where did you learn all that?" "From my parents, sir," Yasmin answered serenely. "Liar," Rashid spat. "You memorized it somewhere. You read it on the internet. It's impossible for a waitress to—" He stopped when he realized the entire restaurant was watching. Customers at the other tables had stopped eating. Waiters stood motionless with trays in their hands. Michel observed from a distance, panic written across his face. Rashid inhaled deeply and tried to regain his composure. Then he changed tactics. If she wanted to play that game, he would destroy her. He returned to the table, picked up his wine glass, and took a long drink. Then he spoke in Arabic, his voice controlled but full of challenge. "Very well. You want to impress us? Let's see how far your knowledge goes." The executives exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Rashid, perhaps this isn't the right moment," one whispered. Rashid raised his hand and silenced him. His eyes remained fixed on Yasmin like those of a predator. "You mentioned a currency hedged with quarterly rollovers on B3, but what if I tell you that liquidity in Brazil's futures market is insufficient for an operation of my size? We're talking about $150 million. How would you handle slippage without exposing the operation to counterparty risk?" Silence. The executives watched Yasmin, expecting her to stammer, retreat, or finally reveal that everything had been a bluff. Instead, Yasmin stepped forward. She placed the empty tray on a side table, folded her hands in front of her body, and answered in Arabic with the same technical calm as before. "You don't need to hedge the entire investment at once. You can divide the position into smaller tranches and enter the market gradually during the periods of highest liquidity, usually between 10 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. That reduces slippage and prevents the transaction itself from moving the market against you." Rashid clenched his teeth. But she continued, "As for operational security, the Brazilian clearing system provides automatic guarantees that greatly reduce counterparty risk. If you still want additional protection, you can use first-tier international banks and secure the exposure through guaranteed currency swap agreements." One of the executives let out a quiet, almost inaudible breath. Rashid felt blood rush to his head. This could not be happening. He tried another angle, his voice becoming more aggressive. "And regulatory risk. You mentioned local instability. Brazil can change its tax rules overnight. How would you ensure that a long-term investment isn't destroyed by the stroke of a president's pen?" Yasmin did not hesitate. "By structuring the legal protections outside Brazil and using international agreements. Several Gulf countries have investment arrangements with Brazil. If the operation is structured through the United Arab Emirates and includes appropriate protection clauses, government rule changes can be treated as a breach of the investment agreement. Any dispute can then be handled through international arbitration rather than relying exclusively on local courts." Rashid took a step back as though he had been struck. The executives could no longer hide their astonishment. Their mouths hung open, but Rashid was unwilling to surrender. Not like that. He clenched his fists and launched his final attack, nearly shouting in Arabic, "Fine. If you're so intelligent, then tell me why you're here serving tables. Why aren't you sitting in an office earning millions if you know so much?" The question echoed through the restaurant. Yasmin felt the wound open inside her, but did not look away. She inhaled deeply and replied in a low, steady voice, because life doesn't always give people the opportunities they deserve. Sometimes it takes everything away at once, and we do whatever we can to survive. For the first time, Rashid had no answer. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Yasmin continued, looking directly into his eyes. But you don't need to worry about that. You were born with opportunities. You were born into wealth and never had to prove yourself to anyone. So you don't know what it feels like to possess knowledge and still be treated as invisible, simply because you're wearing a uniform. The silence in the restaurant was deafening. Rashid had gone pale, not with anger, but with something he could not identify. Shame, discomfort, perhaps both. Michel appeared beside Yasmin, his face tense but professional. "Mr. Hakim," he said politely but firmly, "I apologize for any inconvenience. Yasmin, please go to the back." Yasmin nodded, picked up the tray and turned to leave. "Wait," Rashid said hoarsely. She stopped, but did not look back. "Do you really understand all of this?" he asked in Portuguese, his voice now barely more than a whisper. Yasmin turned her face just enough for him to see her profile. "Yes, sir, I do." Then she left. Rashid remained standing in the middle of the dining room. The executives watched him with expressions of confusion and embarrassment. Michel approached with his hands clasped together. "Mr. Hakim, I deeply regret what happened. It will not happen again. Who is she?" Rashid interrupted distantly. Michel blinked. "What? The waitress. Who is she? What's her full name?" Michel hesitated before answering. "Yasmin Almeida, sir." Rashid repeated the name quietly, as though committing it to memory. "Yasmin Almeida." He returned to the table, picked up his phone, and typed a message to his personal assistant. "I need complete information about someone. Her name is Yasmin Almeida. She works at La Maison d'Or in São Paulo. I want everything. Her background, education, and family history. Have it ready tomorrow morning." He pressed send and returned the phone to his pocket. The executives watched in silence. "Let's finish dinner," Rashid said in Arabic, his voice quiet and controlled, but he barely touched his food for the rest of the evening. His mind remained fixed on the composed young waitress who had just done something no one had ever done before, put him in his place. Rashid Hakim could not sleep that night. Lying in the presidential suite of the Fasano Hotel, he stared at the ceiling while São Paulo glittered below through the panoramic windows. Normally, after a business dinner, he reviewed contracts, answered emails, and planned his next move. But that night, all he could see was Yasmin's face, her steady gaze, calm voice, and unshakable dignity. He picked up his phone and checked his messages. Nothing yet. Bizal, his personal assistant, was efficient, but some information took time. Rashid tossed the phone aside and got out of bed. He walked to the suite's bar, picked up a bottle of water, and drank directly from it. His hands were still trembling slightly, not with anger, but with something worse. Shame. He had spent his entire life being respected, perhaps even feared. Men bowed before him. Negotiations were often won before they began, simply because of the weight of his name. Yet a waitress in her 20s had dismantled him as though he were an amateur. "Who are you?" "Yasmin Almeida," he murmured into the silence. The answer arrived the next morning. Rashid was having coffee on the balcony when his phone vibrated. It was a message from Faisal, complete information on Yasmin Almeida. File attached. Rashid immediately opened the document and began reading. Full name, Yasmin Almeida. Age 24. Current occupation, waitress at La Maison d'Or since 2022. Family history, father Jorge Almeida, deceased in 2021. Professional Arabic interpreter who worked for 18 years at Transglobal Foreign Trade, specializing in negotiations with Persian Gulf countries. Fluent in modern standard Arabic and the Levantine dialect, mother Celia Almeida, deceased in 2021. Certified accountant who worked in financial auditing for multinational corporations, specializing in compliance and risk analysis. Education, completed high school with exemplary grades. studied economics at the University of São Paulo, suspended her degree during the 4th semester in 2021 following the death of her parents. Additional notes: orphaned at 21 after a fatal car accident on the marginal Pinheiros. No siblings or close relatives. History of academic excellence in economics and languages. Fluent in Portuguese, Arabic and English. Briefly worked as a sales assistant before beginning her current employment. Rashid stopped reading. He read the section about her parents twice, then a third time. An Arabic interpreter and an accountant, both killed in the same accident. Their brilliant daughter, who had been studying economics at one of the country's best universities, had been forced to abandon everything simply to survive. Rashid placed the phone slowly on the table, as if it weighed several tons. He remembered what he had asked her the previous night. "If you're so intelligent, why are you here serving tables?" Her answer echoed in his mind. Because life doesn't always give people the opportunities they deserve. Sometimes it takes everything away at once. Rashid closed his eyes and ran a hand across his face. He had been born rich, extremely rich. He was the son of a sheikh and the grandson of a powerful businessman. He had never lacked anything: international schools, elite universities, influential contacts, opportunities and doors that opened before he even knocked. Yasmin had lost everything. Yet she still carried knowledge that many of the executives he knew did not possess. Rashid picked up his phone and sent another message to Faisal. "Reserve a table at La Maison d'Or for tonight." "A discreet table, away from the main dining room." The reply came almost immediately. "Confirmed, sir." Rashid took a deep breath. He did not know exactly what he was going to do. He only knew he needed to see her again. That evening, Yasmin arrived at La Maison d'Or with a heavy heart. She had spent the entire day expecting to be fired. Michel had not said anything directly, but the way he looked at her that morning had conveyed enough. She had caused an enormous problem. Confronting a customer, especially a billionaire, was usually grounds for immediate dismissal. Yet she did not regret it. At least, she had walked away with her head held high. She tied her apron, arranged her hair, and took a deep breath. If that was to be her final day there, she would face it with dignity. When she entered the dining room, Michel called her aside. "Yasmin, you'll be serving table 12 tonight." She frowned. Table 12 was one of the most discreet tables in the restaurant, tucked into a corner away from the activity. Rashid nodded. "That's right. An initial investment of $150 million with a projected annual return of 8%. Yasmin pointed to a specific line in the spreadsheet. "That return is based on cargo traffic that will never materialize." Rashid frowned. "What do you mean?" Yasmin stood and walked toward the window, organizing her thoughts. Then she turned to face him. "The financial model presented by your consultants assumes a continuous 5% annual growth in container traffic. But they failed to consider 3 fundamental issues." She raised one finger. "First, the port of Santos is already operating close to capacity. Any new expansion will need to take customers away from existing terminals. The market won't simply grow. It will become a price war, and you'll be the one absorbing the losses." Rashid's face began to pale. Yasmin raised a second finger. "Second, the contract contains a trap. If you fail to meet the government's targets within 10 years, the concession can be cancelled." "And guess who established those targets?" "The government," Rashid murmured. "Exactly. And the targets are unrealistic. They were designed by bureaucrats who have never worked at a port." "You're walking into a trap," Faisal typed furiously, checking the figures. His expression grew increasingly tense. Yasmin raised a third finger. "Third, and this is the worst part, someone is manipulating the data." Silence. Rashid rose from his chair. "What?" Yasmin picked up a spreadsheet and pointed to a set of figures near the bottom. "These port traffic figures are false. I compared them with the government's official data. The real numbers are 20% lower than the figures in this report. Someone fabricated them to deceive you." Rashid snatched the spreadsheet from her hand and scanned the lines. "That's impossible." These figures came from my own consultants. I pay them a fortune." Yasmin crossed her arms. "Then either your consultants are incompetent, or someone inside your operation desperately wants this investment to proceed, even though it will be a disaster." Faisal stopped typing and looked at Rashid in alarm. Rashid slammed the spreadsheet onto the table, scattering several papers. "Who?" he asked in a quiet, dangerous voice. "Who would do this?" "Someone who benefits from the project's failure," Yasmin replied. "Someone who profits if you lose $150 million. Rashid remained silent as he processed the possibility. Then he turned toward Faisal, who presented this investment to me. "Who brought us the proposal?" Faisal swallowed. "It was Tariq, sir." Tariq al-Rahman had been one of the executives seated at the restaurant table that night. He was also a minority partner in two of Rashid's other companies. Rashid closed his eyes and pressed his fingers against his forehead. "Tariq," he murmured. Yasmin watched him in silence. She recognized the expression on his face. It was the look of someone who had just discovered he had been betrayed by a trusted friend. Rashid opened his eyes and stared at her. "Are you certain? Absolutely certain that these figures are wrong?" "Absolutely," Yasmin answered. "And there's more." She picked up another document, a service agreement, and placed it in front of him. "This is the contract between your company and the consulting firm that prepared the feasibility study. Look at the name of the person who signed on behalf of the consulting firm." Rashid read the signature. His face turned white. "Karim al-Rahman, Tariq's brother," Yasmin confirmed. "He owns the consulting firm that received $2 million to produce this fraudulent study." Rashid slowly sat down, as though his legs had failed him. Faisal stared with his mouth open. "They designed this operation for you to invest and lose," Yasmin continued, her tone technical but not without empathy. "When the project fails, and it will fail, they plan to buy your stake for a fraction of its original value. Then they'll restructure it properly and collect the profits." Rashid ran a hand over his face. "I trusted him," he said, more to himself than to anyone else. "Tariq has been my partner for 5 years. I trusted him." Yasmin sat down again but said nothing. She knew there were no words capable of softening that discovery. After a long silence, Rashid raised his eyes. "How did you uncover all this in 2 days?" "My professional consultant spent months building this project and saw nothing." Yasmin gave him a faint, sad smile. "Because I wasn't looking for what they wanted me to see. I was looking for what they were hiding." Rashid absorbed her answer in silence. "Rashid, this invitation was a surprise. I thought you were traveling." Rashid did not smile. He merely gestured toward the empty chair. "Sit down, Tariq." Tariq's smile wavered for a second, but he sat. Only then did he notice Yasmin seated in the corner. "Who is she?" he asked with a puzzled frown. Rashid ignored the question. "Tariq, do you remember the investment in Santos that you presented to me? The port terminal?" Tariq relaxed and smiled again. "Of course. It's an excellent opportunity. Have you signed the contracts?" Rashid looked at Faisal, who opened the folder and placed 3 documents on the table. "Before signing, I requested an independent audit." Tariq's smile disappeared. "An audit? Why?" "I already gave you everything." Rashid pushed the documents toward him. "These are the real port traffic figures compared with the data you presented to me. Look at the differences." Tariq picked up the papers. Yasmin saw the exact moment the blood drained from his face. "Rashid, this must be some mistake by the consulting firm." "Your brother's consulting firm?" Rashid interrupted coldly. "The firm that received $2 million to falsify data." Silence. Tariq glanced at the attorneys, Faisal and Yasmin, desperately searching for a way out. "This is a misunderstanding," he said, his voice trembling. "I would never." Rashid leaned forward. "You intended to make me lose $150 million and then buy my stake for almost nothing after the project failed, didn't you?" Tariq opened his mouth, but no words came out. "You were my partner and my friend," Rashid continued, every word cutting like a blade. "And you stabbed me in the back." Tariq finally found his voice. "Rashid, please, we can discuss this privately." "No." Rashid stood. "We have nothing left to discuss. You are out of every company and every business we shared." "It's over." Tariq went pale. "You can't do that." "Yes, he can," one of the attorneys said. "And it has already been done. Your assets in Mr. Hakim's companies have been frozen. You will receive the official notification today." Tariq turned toward Yasmin with pure hatred in his eyes. "It was you, wasn't it? The waitress who thinks she's clever." Yasmin held his gaze without saying a word. Rashid walked around the table until he stood face to face with Tariq. "She saved me from you. And yes, she is more intelligent than you will ever be." Tariq stood, trembling with desperation. "Rashid, I have a family. I have debts. You can't do this." "I can't." Rashid took a step back, his voice as cold as ice. "Get out of my sight now!" Tariq looked around one last time, searching for compassion. He found none. He stumbled out of the room, and the door closed softly behind him. Rashid returned to his chair and sat heavily, as though he had just run a marathon. Yasmin stood. "I'll leave you to handle the rest." "Wait," Rashid said. She stopped. He opened a drawer and removed an envelope. 150,000 rays. As promised, Yasmin took the envelope, feeling its weight in her hands. "And I have an offer," Rashid continued. "Come work for me officially as an investment consultant. A fixed salary, profit sharing, and a formal contract." Yasmin remained silent. "I need time to think," Rashid nodded. "Think about it, but don't take too long. People like you are rare." Yasmin smiled faintly and left. 3 days later, Yasmin returned to La Maison d'Or for the final time as a waitress. She had spent the previous night thinking about the money in her bank account, the genuine employment offer, and the chance to begin again. Before accepting anything, however, she needed to close that chapter of her life. Michelle met her at the entrance, surprised. "Yasmin, I didn't think you were coming back," she smiled. "I came to say goodbye." "Goodbye? I received a job offer and I'm going to accept it. But first, I wanted to thank you. You were always fair to me." Michelle remained silent for a moment before smiling genuinely. "You deserve it, Yasmin. I always knew there was something different about you." She thanked him and was about to leave when she heard a voice behind her. "Yasmin." She turned. Rashid stood at the restaurant's entrance, wearing an impeccable navy blue suit. But there was something different about him. He seemed lighter. "May I speak with you?" he asked. Yasmin looked at Michelle. He nodded and moved away discreetly. Rashid approached her. "Have you considered my offer?" "I have," Yasmin answered. "And I'm going to accept a position, but not yours." Rashid frowned. "What do you mean?" Yasmin smiled. "I received another offer from one of your competitors, Abdulaziz Al-Farsi. He heard what I did and contacted me yesterday. He offered twice the salary and an equity stake." Rashid remained silent as he processed the news. Then, to Yasmin's surprise, he smiled. "Abdulaziz is clever. He always has been." He extended his hand. "Congratulations, Yasmin, truly." Yasmin shook it, but continued. "There's something I need to tell you before I go." Rashid waited. "That night, when you humiliated me in front of everyone, you weren't attacking only me. You were attacking every person you considered inferior to you. Waitresses, shop assistants, cleaners, and people you don't even bother to look in the eye." Rashid lowered his head, his shame visible. "You were born with privilege," Yasmin continued firmly, "but without cruelty. That isn't your fault. But the way you treat people is your choice. And that night you chose to be cruel." Rashid raised his eyes. There was genuine pain in them. "I know, and I'm sorry. I have no excuse." "I accept your apology," Yasmin said. "But don't apologize only to me. Honor that apology through every person you meet from now on. Treat them with respect, because you never know who is standing before you." Rashid remained silent for a long moment. "You taught me a lesson no one ever had the courage to teach me," he finally said in Arabic. Yasmin answered in the same language, "Because no one else ever had the chance. You surrounded yourself with people who only said yes. I didn't need anything from you, so I was free to tell you the truth." Rashid smiled, a genuine smile, without arrogance. "That is why you'll go far. Yasmin Almeida, She smiled back. I know. Rashid extended his hand once more. If you ever decide to change jobs, my door will remain open. Yasmin shook his hand. Who knows? But for now, I have other plans. Good luck, Yasmin. Good luck to you too. Yasmin turned and walked out of the restaurant. Outside, the São Paulo sun shone brightly. Traffic filled the streets with noise, hurried people moved along the sidewalks, and the city pulsed with life. She took a deep breath, feeling the air fill her lungs. For the first time in 3 years, since the death of her parents, she felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope. It was not about money or revenge. It was about dignity. It was about proving to herself that she had value, that a uniform did not define who she was, and that pain did not have to be the end of her story. Yasmin took out her phone and called Abdulaziz. Hello? Yes, this is Yasmin. I accept your offer. When do I start? The voice on the other end responded enthusiastically. She smiled. Excellent. I'll see you on Monday. She ended the call and continued walking along the avenue with her head held high and her shoulders back. Behind her, through the windows of La Maison d'Or, Rashid watched her leave. For the first time in his life, he felt something he had never experienced while watching someone walk away. Admiration, true admiration. How many people like Yasmin have you encountered and failed to take seriously because of their uniform, their accent, or the place where they worked? This story is a reminder that no amount of respect is ever wasted. If this message spoke to you, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever been underestimated like Yasmin? I want to read your story. Perhaps it will appear in a future video and inspire other people as well. Your participation truly makes all the difference here.